Hola amigos! Welcome back to Latina Living History. I'm Katie, and today we're going to go on a little adventure where we learn some basic leatherworking from Grant, aka Cxizent, whose channel I will link in the description below. Grant makes cosplay leatherwork items as well as other household goods, and let me just tell you, his work is amazing. And he's a funny guy. So when Ash LG brought up the idea of a skill swap where costumers kind of get together and learn a new thing from each other, I jumped at the chance to learn some leatherworking from a guy with a great accent. My husband, who also has a great accent, got in on the bargain too. So in the next few minutes, you're going to see the three of us learning how to do some leather work, or rather, Grant teaching two of us how to do some leather work. The reason I wanted to learn how to do this is because living history involved a lot of leather. There's, for men particularly, a lot of accessories where leatherworking is a really handy skill to have in order to make our own stuff. I also happen to own a horse, and a lot of horse tack is also leather. So I found myself every time I was shopping for a bridle or stirrup leathers or something like that going, I could make that if I knew how. And I never did before, but now I do, and I'm super excited to show you what we came up with.
So I don't have a complete belt. I've just got a few scraps that are going to be the same size as what you guys are working with.
Yep, we're doing a practice run. So we have the actual hero belt materials back there. This is going to be practice for Rich.
Yeah. That is much wiser than the way that I normally operate.
Same, but like, you know.
Okay, so before we get into putting the paint onto it, we're going to want to just get the edges beveled. So with the edge beveler, because the belt leather is, oh, come on, focus.
There we go.
Because the belt leather is only thin, you only want a really, really small size on the edge beveler there. And the way that you're going to do it is to just use your offhand to apply a bit of pressure. Hang on, I'm trying to get this at a decent angle. You'll just use your offhand to apply a bit of pressure. Depending on how thick your leather is, it may want to wander. So you're going to use your offhand to apply just a bit of pressure down onto the desk. You're going to hold this at about a 45-degree angle just so that it catches the edge. Depending on how thick the leather is, it may want to wander, but it'll be fine. You just sort of, once it catches, you should be able to just keep that pressure along and keep it going along the edge, as I'm not managing to do. That was a really poor demonstration.
It's okay, Rich is doing it.
Uh,
Do you need
There
to
we
bevel
go.
the little divots that you... Okay, well, I guess we're doing that anyway. And so beveling the edge, you said, keeps it from mushrooming out when you burnish it?
That's correct. So we're just removing these tiny little pigtails of leather. And if you get a really close in cross section of it, you'll knit. So rather than having like a harsh rectangle, we're just basically putting a chamfer on it.
Okay, and you do both edges so that it doesn't...
Yep.
Okay.
So we can do the rear side as well. Here we go. So the smaller strap as well. I'll just quickly hit that edge. Take the label off.
Yeah, you can eat those. Wait, no, this isn't an apple.
Yeah, so the smaller and thinner that the leather is that you're trying to bevel the edge, the more that it's going to want to just wander all over the place. So the thin strap might be a bit more of a problematic one. So I've got my trusty and well-worn bit of beeswax
look
here.
at that.
Yeah, you can see the divots in it from where I've been waxing the edges of belts.
Someday yours can look just like that.
So basically, I like to just get it held in one hand, so that I've got the edge there. And again, if your leather is thicker or if it is just a firmer piece, then it's going to be easier. But if it's too supple, then you'll have to get a fairly decent grip on it and just sort of apply a bit of wax. So even if you start off applying it with a flat side, you'll very quickly run yourself a groove into the wax that will keep you on the edge. We're trying to keep the majority of the wax on the edge here and not on the front, but it shouldn't matter too much because we are going to be covering the whole thing up with paint. God, excuse me.
It's all right. You're more than 6 feet away.
Yeah, only just. Man, this has been the worst year to have hay fever. I'll tell you what, the looks I get.
Yeah, right? People are like, oh, Typhoid Mary approaching.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I swear I'm safe. I've been paranoid. Okay, so I'm just going to apply wax to one edge at a time. And once you've got the wax applied, you can get your whatever it is that you're using to burnish. I'll be using this wooden burnishing tool. Oh, yep, you've got basically the exact same one. So with one like this, I mean, you can use any part of it or any bit of wood or even like a bone folder or essentially whatever to burnish. I've seen people do it with pieces of glass, but in our case, you're just going to pick the correctly sized divot in the burnisher for the thickness of your leather. So you want it to not push the edges in too much, but you don't want it to be completely flat either. So I think that is a little bit too wide for mine because that's just going to push it down and make it want to mushroom out more. I think that this one is going to be a closer fit for mine. You want a little bit of contact on the corners. And then this is done sort of similarly to the way that I put the wax on it. I'm just getting it in a good grip. If you've got a saddle, saddle pony or a clamp to put it in, by all means, clamp it. But
that one we don't have.
Yeah, I mean, with a belt, you're going through a lot of length anyway, so you're having to keep readjusting. So you can just sort of hold it in your hand and just apply the friction. And it shouldn't be too long at all before the friction will heat the beeswax up. So what this is doing, the heat and the friction is forcing the beeswax into the material of the leather. So leather is a fibrous, non-homogeneous material. And you can see on mine already that this is starting to get darker. The color will change and it'll start to become really glossy and shiny as the beeswax gets worked into it. Yeah, and obviously for this project, we are just going to be like painting over this, but I mean, I personally love the look of the sort of natural veg tan with the darker edge from the beeswax. Like that, you know, you can just put a coat of oil on that and call it a day if we weren't sort of working towards...
if the British Army didn't like to be extra.
Right. So I'll just quickly do my other edges.
You bubble this? Yeah, you did.
I guess I'll try and hold it on the camera so you guys get some decent shots.
It's all right. I'm filming Rich down here with this guy too. So we'll have side by side of you guys, both of you with nicer fingernails than me.
Get that multicam action.
There you go. I see what you mean about the thinner strip wanting to wander.
Yeah.
Just kind of is like, no, I'm good. Bye.
Yeah, it's nice working with the thinner leather, you know, for sewing it. You don't have to punch through as much. It's not as heavy. It's not as much of a pain. But then, yeah, for applications like this, it has a mind of its own.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've only ever worked with thin leather for stay binding, and that's, I mean, you want it to wiggle everywhere. So you're not edge finishing it at all.
Yeah, because that's just encasing the edge of the fabric, right?
Yep.
Yeah. I always find myself gripping the burnisher way too tightly, and all the tension transfers to my shoulder. And end up just like clicking and crunching to get myself into a bit of a looser stance. See, I like this is one of the things that I like about leather is it sounds weird to say that I like all of the prep work. You know, whereas for fabric, you know, I buy it off of the bolt in the color that I want, and then I'm attaching it to other stuff. And with leather, it's like, no. Before I even get to painting it, I've got to tidy all of these things up. It's a really meditative process for me, just going through the steps.
Makes sense.
But I can see how it is tedious. Okay, and that is the last of the strap for me, I believe.
Yep, we're good.
Yeah. Wonderful. So yeah, like I was saying, I would recommend using a brush to apply the acrylic paint. You can use all manner of things. So like I've got wool daubers and like sponges and stuff, but especially the daubers tend to leave a lot of fibers behind on it, and that to me spoils it a little bit. So
we've got a artist flat brush, so there you go.
Oh, that's even better than mine.
Oh, did you shake that? Are you supposed to shake it? You should probably shake it.
Yeah, give it a little. Mine is.
We're
mine
hella
is
out of focus if you care.
Yeah.
There we go.
There we go. So mine, I'm using Phoebing's brand acrylic dye. It says dye, it's a paint. Mine is, I know that mine is a good consistency already out of the bottle, but if you need to water yours down, you know, to get it the right consistency to apply.
I guess we'll find out. I don't know what that is.
Yeah, this is what the test piece is for. So, yeah, I'm a klutz. So I'm going to get, no, this is fine. Don't mind me just muttering to myself.
This is fine. What could go wrong?
So, yeah, it's just a matter of, let's zoom in a bit. You know, like painting any other surface, I'm just loading the brush up and just getting it on there. So it's going on pretty streaky, and you can see the brush strokes, but going back for a second coat should cover most of that up.
So is this different? This is different than a dye in that you don't have to wet it beforehand?
That's correct. So the reason that I pointed out that this is a paint and not a dye, dyes alcohol-based dyes are to penetrate the leather and go deeper than the surface and to dye those fibers that make up the material, whereas a paint like this is just to go on the surface.
And am I correct in thinking that just like with things like hair dye or fabric dye, you can't go lighter with a dye?
That is correct. Okay. So because we're making this white, it has to be a paint. Because otherwise you would need to start off with a white leather.
Right. Don't forget your other strap. Don't forget baby strap. And do you do the edges separately?
I generally will do one face. Then I'll, if you want to do the rear, I think that especially for the thinner straps, like this one's going to be flapping around in the breeze, so you may want to paint both sides. Then once I've painted both sides and I can hold it, I'll get the edges last.
That makes sense. No, that is a smell.
Yeah, try not to breathe too deeply. So I'll give that a minute to dry while I try and tidy up all the spots where I painted outside the lines.
Easy there, killer. Looks nice.
Yeah.
I was considering buying some pipe clay. Try and do it the authentic way, but
oh yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
What is pipe clay?
It is I don't remember.
I'm assuming that that's where they would have gotten the white pigment from back in the day.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a type of clay. Surprisingly, from its name.
Oh, it's like literally used to make pipes.
Yes.
That's why it's called pipe clay.
Ah, that makes sense. The trick is in the name.
Yeah. You mix it with water and some gum dragon, it was called in the day.
Tragacanth?
Yes, tragacanth is what it's called nowadays. And that makes a paint which you can use.
We can try that someday, but maybe not today.
Yeah.
But I do remember the reading in the Aubrey Maturin series about the Marines pipe claying their strap goods.
Yeah.
I want to get like what are they called? The like oak knots or whatever that they made ink out of. Like
Oak gall.
Oak gall, that's it. Yeah, I definitely want to try that at some point. Make myself some black ink. Yeah, so my small strap is dry. I can, run my hands along it and no paint's coming off. So I'm going to flip that face down. Now the back of it, the suede side, I guess, if you want to call it that, the flesh side, is furrier, and it generally is going to want to wick moisture away faster than the skin side. So you may find that you need to load your brush up a little bit more, or you may need to water the paint down a little bit just to get the coverage. So yeah, the rear side is always going to be more of a matte finish, just because it's not a flat surface like the front side.
Mm-hmm. All right, just to let you know, Rich is working ahead in class and painted the edges of some of his stuff too.
I was just about to say, now that I've gotten the paint on both of them, I'm just going to get the edges. And I mean, like, you can see on my thin strap that just by nature of me being heavy-handed with the brush, a lot of the edge has been got already. So I'm just going to go over those bits. Rich just out here overachieving.
Yeah.
Okay, now I suppose we'll give that a minute or two to dry.
So, all right, I'm gonna go start dinner.
Okay.
I will, so same time tomorrow?
Yeah. That works.
Awesome. So the next step is going to be actually affixing the hardware to it. So I figured that we would start with the ring for the belt. Just basically start with some stitching. So it's just going to go through there and fold back and be stitched onto itself. Now, if your belt is too rigid, or it's just sort of not cooperating, you can put some water on it to make it more flexible. Now, because we've put acrylic paint all over the front, that's not really going to absorb any moisture. But just to get it to bend nicer, what you can do is just get a little bit of water and just sort of moisten the back of it. It'll soak in a little bit nicer through the back, and that will sort of get the water into the body of the leather and make it more pliable and more willing to accept a new shape. So with leather, the level of moisture is one of the more important aspects depending on what you're doing. So if you get a little bit of moisture into it to the point that it's cool to the touch, I often check it with either the back of my hand or my cheekbone. If it's a little bit cool to the touch, it'll generally be more pliable. And then when it dries out, it will stay pliable. Whereas if you completely saturate it and you get into the realms of wet forming, so once you reach a certain level of moisture in it, once it dries out, it's gonna want to remain stiff and rigid. So it is something that you'll sort of get used to as you work with it more, how much moisture it actually wants.
Is that something that varies from like hide to hide and type of leather?
Yes, absolutely. So this is talking about veg tan specifically. Chrome tan doesn't respond the same way, and it varies from hide to hide, and also with thickness as well. So if you're tooling, a thicker leather is better because it can, just by having more volume, it can take more water into it without reaching that saturation point. So you sort of got more room to play with before you start getting something that's going to dry very stiff and rigid. So what I am going to do here, you guys have some just like contact cement or leather crafting glue?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yep. I should have grabbed mine before I started. Where is it? So I am using the Phoebing's Leathercraft Cement of Glue. No, it's just a brand name.
Yeah, it's just contact cement.
So with this, you're going to want to fold it over so that you have enough room to sort of prick some holes in there, and also have the ring not be completely bound tight. You know, the whole point of having the ring in it is so that you've got a little bit of movement in the belt and the stuff hanging off of it. So I've got, God, what's that in imperial? I don't know, maybe like 3/4 of an inch from where I can feel the edge of the belt, about the width of my thumb. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to get a scratch awl, and I'm just going to mark that line with my awl, just so that I can see where I've got to put the glue up to. Oh yeah, now you can see it on the camera. So yeah, I've just scratched a little line in it with the awl. And then also with the awl, all that I'm going to do is just scratch the surface a little bit to rough it up. Because it's the flesh side of the leather, you don't really need to scratch it up too much because it's a fairly rough texture to begin with. But this will just help the glue to bind on and do its thing.
All I can see is your knuckles.
Sorry, let me remove my hand. And then I'm just going to scratch the mating surface. And then once you're ready to put the glue on, you can get just sort of, I like to just apply a thin line directly on. Wow. It's very hard to differentiate what's what when it's white painted. Focus. There we go. So once I've got the glue on, I'll just generally get like a little bit of scrap leather, and I'll just use that to move it around. You can use a bit of cardboard or like an old library card, or literally anything that's going to hold a bit of shape. And I'm just getting that to a nice thin layer. And then likewise on the mating surface. I'm just waiting for it to get tacky. Okay, mine's starting to get nice and tacky. I can see that it's you know, coming away with my thumb when I'm tapping it. So I'm just going to apply a bit of pressure on mine. Yeah, mine is starting to bind up quite nicely. So a few more minutes and we should be in a point where we can start stamping through it.
Okay.
I find that when I'm doing leatherwork, just having different sized and different shaped bits of wood is super helpful. Like when I was making the gloves, I just needed a bit of wood that was narrow enough to get in, but thick enough to like keep the shape up while I was punching the last sort of holes through it. So it's like, yeah, when you're making, I guess, three-dimensional things, that you always want an odd shape to prop something up or hold something down or to like pierce through with something. So yeah. 2 ways that we can punch the holes through here. Now, I believe that in the picture that you sent me, the stitching was not running, the stitching wasn't running sort of up and down as a straight line. It was sort of following the curve of the ring. So if you want to mimic that, it shouldn't be too difficult. But you might need something like this, like wing dividers, or you could just use a compass if you've got. So what we're going to do, I'm going to measure, whoop, dear me. I'm going to measure this from the rear side just so that I can see how far I can go. I want to wind up about midway between where I can feel the edge of that ring and the edge here. So I'm just going to wind these basically all the way out. and I'm testing it on this point. Obviously, we've left ourselves enough room here for error so that it's not going to go past. But say if I measured it from this edge and there was less room to play with, you don't want it to be the sort of thing where you start going out and then go over the edge where the belt is folded over, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So basically, I'm just going to wind this all the way out, and I can see that if I leave this mark on the front, it's not going to foul over and come over here. It's going to wind up in a pretty good spot on this reverse side. So that's just sort of sizing up the gap. And like I said, I've just got mine extended fully. That's about 10 mil or just less than half an inch. And then once you've gotten your calipers or your wing dividers or whatever you want to call them, once you've gotten the sizing on that right, we can flip over to the front side, get the ring where it wants to sit. And then basically we're going to try and trace it so that we're using where the ring is resting to sort of line up the first jaw, but we're not putting much pressure on the first jaw. We want all the pressure to be on the second jaw. The second jaw is going to leave the line that we're going to follow to stitch. So basically, the way that I'm going to do it is to just sort of rest it on the side. I can feel the ring on the side of that, and I'm just going to run like this. So there. You can see that there's there's a very, very faint mark here, but the prominent mark is from that second jaw, and that's going to be the line that we're going to trace to put the thread in this. So if you've got your line all sorted, the next thing that we're going to do is to actually punch the holes that we're going to be stitching.
So you're using the one that has 4 prongs?
Yep, I would use the one that has 4. So
there you go.
Yeah, that one. That looks good. That looks very similar spacing to mine. And I find that 4 prongs is kind of the sweet spot where you can follow a curve. If the curve gets too tight, then that's like something else that we can deal with just 2 prongs or something. But I'm going to be using 4. So actually, let me just move my camera to the other side of me, because otherwise my left hand is going to block out all of the action.
Oh, like Rich's has been this whole time? Yes. Okay.
Called out. All right.
Usually the one behind the camera. So no one's telling me that's not in shot. That's not in shot. So I really have to get my licks in while I can.
Yeah, you don't want to let Rich have all of the fun. Okay, I think that's going to be all right. So we're going to punch these holes moving toward ourselves. So starting at the furthest edge. And the way that we're going to figure out where we need to strike, where the first hole is. Let me pull this up so that it is a little bit better. Basically, I'm going to get 2 of the tines of my fork, say the first 2. I'm just going to rest it so that that one tine is sitting on top of the leather, like that. And then with the tine that is on the leather, I'm just going to push in and leave a little impression, just so that when I pull it back, I can see that little dint, that little mark from the tine. Okay. And so that's going to, first of all, that's going to get you a good distance close to the edge so that it's not going to split apart too much. And also it's going to be very visually pleasing because the distance to the edge will be the same as the distance between your stitches.
Okay.
Is the reason why I bothered with that. Then it's just a matter of, I'll turn that so that we can see and zoom in just a tiny bit. Then it is going to be a matter of parking the furthest tine from me in that little divot that I've just created, and parking the closest tine to me on that line. And this is why we're hammering towards ourselves, so that I can get in. I'm going to get down level with it and just make sure that that is touching exactly it. If you're not confident, you can sort of lift it up and see where the indents are. So I can see that because this is a slight curve and this is only 4 tines, that basically all 4 of my spots are going to be exactly on the line. So I'll just get that aligned again. And now comes the loud part.
I think you're going to need to hit it harder than that.
Yeah, don't be shy. So if you've got a bone folder or anything like that, now is the point at which you can be really schmancy. So I like to use a bone folder just to press down on it while I pull the pricking iron back up. But I mean, you can just put your fingers on there. And then it is a matter of just going from the last hole that you've struck and lining it up and doing it all over again. Okay, yep. So here I can see that my last one is going to take me too close to that edge. So I'm just going to leave those indents there. And instead of hitting that through with the fork, I'm just going to grab an awl and I'm going to use my awl to punch those last 2. Yeah, so if you've got something like long and flat like a bone folder, that can help to pull the fork out. So sort of when it's stuck in there, it just lets you put a lot of pressure horizontally to sort of pluck this out. I don't know if you have one of those. If you've got like a sharp awl that is going to be long enough to pierce through, it might be an idea just to use the fork to sort of leave indentations on the leather and then actually punch the holes one by one with the awl. Yeah, so that's what I'm going to be doing on these last few on mine. So you can do it with any kind of awl, like a round one or, you know, a diamond section one like I've got here. It really doesn't make much difference.
Trying to see what we've got in these things. I think that might be
Wow, yeah, you got a really thick blank, didn't you? Well, you know, once you get through it, that belt is going to hang anything you want off of it.
Okay, we have all of the hose.
Excellent. So now the next part is the stitching. So I am going to be using some linen thread and a couple of needles. You said that you guys don't have like a clamp or like a stitching pony. Is that right?
No.
Yep, that's fine. I'll do it. I will do it without one then, so that we're all doing the same thing. So I'm using linen thread. I mean, you can use poly or I see a lot of people, like I see a lot of other leather crafters using artificial catgut or like various other
I think we have
polyester materials, but it's fine.
I mean, linen is what would have been.
Yeah, and I mean, I like working with the natural thread because I like waxing it. I don't know. It's just like that little ritual before you get stuck into it. So the way that I measure my thread is that I will see how far it needs to go. And with a thick belt like this, I'll get 4 times that amount. So in half once, twice, 4 times, and then I'll cut off a reasonable chunk just for good luck. So that's the length that I'm going to be working with for this little bit here. And I'll probably have a little bit left over, but that's fine. And then the same trusty old block of beeswax, I'm just going to run the thread through it a couple times. So with the thread and the needles that I have at any rate, this might be something that, you know, you have to play around with. I'm just going to try and get the camera to focus on my hands. So I'm just going to thread it into the needles. Because it's waxed, I can just flatten the end of it down. So even though the thread is quite thick, that will just go right through. And then once it's through, there are some people who like tie all kinds of crazy knots and that sort of nonsense, but I literally just fold it in half. And then because it's waxed, it's just going to keep that shape, you know, it's not going to get away from you. So I'll literally just have a needle on either end and fold the thread back on it. The orientation that I'm going to have the piece in is I'm going to have the hero side, so the outside of the belt, on my dominant hand's side, and I'm going to be stitching toward myself. So because we're not using a stitching pony, I'm just going to be holding it on the bench and it's going to be flopping around as it does. So on the furthest hole away from myself, I'm just going to feed the thread through and then grab both needles. So because I've got it like this, if I grab them on the eye, I'm pinching down on where the thread is folded over and I can just pull it as tight as I want. And that's just to make sure we've got the even amount of thread on both sides. Yeah, there are ways that you can thread the needle to just have a knot in it. Just by sort of pulling more through than you need and then using the needle to pierce and then sort of sleeve it on. But that's not something that I have ever done before personally, so I shan't attempt to show you how to do it. I'm going to show you the way of doing this with an awl because I find that it flows quite well, and also it keeps the threads tidier. So the way that I generally do it is I'll get just any old awl. I think that yours looks like that, so I'll use this one. And I'll just park that in the sort of flat of my hand, and then I will hold one needle in between my index and middle fingers on each hand. So the reason that you have the awl, I'll just show you in profile, is so that on the next thread hole, what I'm going to do is poke the awl through from the front side. So you can see just the very tip of the awl coming through onto the rear. Mm-hmm. And then from the rear side, I'm basically going to follow, as I pull the awl back out, I'm going to follow it with the offhand needle. And that offhand needle is going to come through. Once the offhand needle is through, I'm going to grab onto it with the same hand, like with my dominant hand. I'm going to just keep these aligned. So this is the part where I'm going to talk a lot about geometry. So as I pull that through, I can see that because these holes are diamond section, what I want to do is I want to get the dominant hand needle, the needle that hasn't gone through yet, and I'm going to want to put that on the far side. So we've got towards me on this edge, and we've got the far side on this one. So you can see that the needle that we've just pulled through from the offside, we want that towards ourselves. So you can see that's in the very bottom left corner of that diamond section hole that it's coming out of. So this needle is going to go through the top right. And then once it gets through to the other side, this step is optional, but I like doing it because it keeps it neat and tidy. Once the right hand needle or the dominant hand needle is poking through to the rear of the piece, you can see that that is coming out just next to that thread. So it's not caught up in it. It's coming out on the same corner that we pushed it through. All I'm going to do is get this thread and just loop it around like that. That's called casting the thread. And that just means that once that thread is cast and I pull this through, when I pull this tight, it's less likely to knot up and it's going to sit nicer on the offside. So when I pull it through, when I pull it tight from the front side, because I can see that this is coming out on the, I can see that this is coming out on the side of the chisel mark that angles down. So I'm going to pull this down. And I can see that this is coming out on the side of the chisel that is going up. So I'm going to pull one side down and one side up. And then you can see that that stitch, when you're looking at it, that bit of thread is going from the bottom corner of the first one to the top corner of the next one. And so doing it in that, doing your threads in that method, just making sure that they're in the right corners, is going to keep that sort of repeating as we go along. I feel like I just vomited a whole lot of words at you there. Yeah. But that is how I get a repeatable saddle stitch. If you're struggling with the awl because it's quite thick, you don't need to use the awl. You can just sort of, so if you were doing it without the awl, I would start with the back side, push through to the front.
It is 74 down here, in case you were wondering why we're so damn hot.
Then once that's through to the front side, same thing. I'll pull that out and pull it down. And then I'll get the thread from the front side and put it up in the other corner. Cast it on the way through. Pull the rear side up. Pull the front side down. So there you can see that is a nice, neat, repeatable stitch. Anyway, I'll just let you guys get on with it. And then when we get towards the end, I'll show you how to finish it off. I've just reached the end. I'll just wait here for you. Yeah, it looks like you got a good curve on it there. You're going to be upset with me because the way that we finish it off is by going back a few stitches. It gets real crowded in there real quick. But what we're trying to do, I'll just show you in super duper close-up mode. So what we're trying to do is with the, please God work. There we go. So this is my last hole that I'm coming out of. What we're going to want to do is go back one hole. But what you're trying to do is pierce the thread so that we're purposefully tying a knot. So with the head of my needle, I'm going to just catch a bit of this so you can hopefully see that I'm already piercing that bit of thread. So that little lump of thread that's coming up, I'm just going to pierce it. So you can see there's thread on either side of the needle. And then I'm just going to shove that through to the back. So on the top, it'll start to get bulky because now there's two lots of thread going between those two holes. And on something structural like a belt, or especially if you're doing a knife sheath or something, I like to go back even three stitches. So I'll probably go back 3 here. And then it's just the same thing from the back side. Try not to pierce the thread that's just come through. Try and pierce the existing stitch. So I'll pull the thread that's come through out of the way as I try and pierce this lump of thread. I've got my needle halfway through that, so now I'm just going to shove it through the hole. So in practice, what we're doing is That stitch now has 2 separate knots tied in it, but the knots are tied where the threads pass each other in the actual hole. They're not visible. So that's how you can tie it off and keep it neat and tidy. Your holes were already looking very crowded, so you'll definitely need to use the pliers to pull it through for this one. On items that don't have a front and a back side, so on, say, a knife sheath or something, I would leave it with 1 thread on either side. But because this belt has a front and a back, I'm just going to finish with both threads on the back. So I'm just going to take this one on the front and shove it through one last time. Once you've gotten it, yeah, you've got both of yours poking out the back. I've just got my little snips and I'll just snip it as close as I can. If you're super duper paranoid, you can put like a dot of glue on the back and let it dry there. I don't think that that's always necessary. I just like to get the end of my maul and just sort of upset the edge a little bit. So after I've tapped it, the threads are just laying nice and flat and flush, and those ends aren't going to be able to sort of slip back through easily. And we've got our painted belt with the ring that can still spin fairly freely through it. And then the last thing is to get the small belt that's going to hang off of it, right? So the plan, I think, is for that to just kind of hang off of one side. Because I'm just using a wheel punch, this might just be me, but I just like to make sure that I'm punching holes the right size before I punch the hero piece. So I'm pretty sure that this one is correct, but I'm just going to punch a scrap piece and make sure that the rivet fits through it. Yep, that's exactly the right size. So I'm just going to get that at a point where it's going to hold itself on, but still move back and forth.
Yeah, that works. Okay.
Yeah.
Now that I've undone this and I'm going to keep them in this little baggie because I don't know what was in this little baggie, but we want to keep them together.
Oh, yikes. Oh, that's not on center at all. I screwed that up. Oh, well. Yeah, it looks like that strikes down. So your rivets are going to function slightly differently. As you strike the stalk is going to get upset. The top of it is going to spread out, and that's going to prevent the button from sliding up it. It looks like yours are meant to be cut so that the stalk is sort of just above where the button is.
Well, our leather is pretty thick, so that's about what we got.
Yeah.
All right, excellent. Yeah, whereas mine, I need to pick the right length of rivet for the leather I'm working with. So I'll just put mine on and tap it down. Hey!
You sure it's not this one?
Oh, did that not go?
It did a little bit, but you might need to just really bail on it.
So the striker should have a bit of a dished end like this.
Yeah.
It does.
Yeah.
Yeah, there you go. Blend it.
Yeah. Okay.
Ah! All right, show to camera.
Nice.
Focus. Focus. Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, it's not centered at all.
There we have ring mounted on belt with the extra little tassel-y bit on it.
We didn't pound on our rivet hard enough. Or is it possible that's not even long enough to go through the ridiculously thick leather? I don't know. Can I hit it again?
That little dished anvil bit, is it possible that you're meant to put the the rivet the other way around. You know, like hit it
Could be.
hit it down into that. So you've got the button on the bottom.
Problem doing it that way is I can't see what I'm doing.
Yeah, I don't think so. It's got the little thing coming up on all of the illustrations.
Okay.
You might have to take it out and do it on concrete. Sometimes when I set grommets for like corsetry, doing it on a table has just a little too much give.
Right.
And so this might be as good as it gets on an IKEA table.
Yeah, if it's solid, excuse me. If it's solid brass, I know that people who use solid copper rivets, you can just upset the end of it with a metal hammer. Like if you have a regular like hardened steel claw hammer, you can just use that to upset the end if you've got it set on an anvil.
That was the other thing that I would also potentially work is you might need to do it on concrete and you might need to do it with a metal hammer because this guy is hard-ish plastic, but not anything like a.
Yeah.
So I think you've got the right idea. It's just with the substrate that you've got, it may not cooperate.
Okay.
But yeah, now you get the idea.
Yeah.
We've test piece complete.
We did it, guys. I mean you guys.
Oh, well done.
Thank you, Grant. This was really cool.
No, thank you guys for inviting me over because the two things that I love are working with leather and the sound of my own voice. So this has been a lot of fun for me.
Here we go. Cool. All right. Now there's room for me here. If I come over here. There we go. Well, this was really fun. And I'm glad we got to do something like this for the skill swap because this is, like I said, every time I look at horse stuff, I'm like, man, I really wish I worked with leather. And he was talking about a dragoon outfit to go with the horse display that we take to events. And it was like, okay, I mean, I can sew you a uniform, but there's all sorts of other stuff. So now we know ish.
This was a really good project to pick because basically between painting, sewing, and riveting, you can put leather together in 1,000 different ways. Like you picked a really good sort of project that just has like foundational level stuff on it. Like obviously making a saddle for a horse is like a whole other world, but like, you know, making bags or making like, you know, scabbards or just anything else to go on the uniforms, like these skills are all sort of transferable stuff.
We were talking about saddle making it's a whole other world, but like any sort of strap goods, you know, bridles, halters, rein, you know, anything that's a strap good for a horse. Girth, you can make a girth with this. So
yeah. You know, stuff. I know that a lot of like the I think the girth and a lot of the bridle straps that I've seen have like the stitching sort of running all the way down the edge if they're multiple layers of leather, but it's like that's all saddle stitching, you know, like you don't need a machine, you don't need like heaps like crazy expensive stuff, like you can do it just with the chisel and a couple of needles. So yeah, this is how I have fun.
That's pretty good. I like it. Thank you so much for letting us apprentice for a couple of days.
No, thank you very much for having me for these couple of days. It has been a lot of fun.
So after all of that, it was time to sit down and actually make the belt that Rich wanted. He wanted a cavalry-style sword belt to go with a cavalry-style sword that he got for Christmas, as you do. And so it already had some parameters defined. It needed to A, fit him, B, have hanger things for the sword, and it had specific hardware that we needed to use. So we took a trip to our local Tandy and we picked up all of the stuff that you saw in the video, and then Rich went online and found all of the actual historically specific stuff that would go on a cavalry belt. In the end, I decided to use pre-dyed white leather because on a belt with so much flex in it, we found that the acrylic paint tended to crack. So in order to give this more longevity and durability, we went with pre-dyed white leather. That also meant that I could skip some of the burnishing steps because I looked at originals and they didn't have that either. Some of the fancier belts were really nice and had decorative stitching and all of that, but for just a basic belt, it looks like they went and just cut the leather. Rich did all the measuring and math for the lengths of leather that we needed for this because math really isn't my forte and I hate it. So he very graciously stepped in to do that for me and just gave me a cut list of the sizes of leather that I would need to have. I ended up doing all the sewing because that is apparently my role in our relationship, but I don't mind because practice is good. Practice makes, if not perfect, at least pretty proficient. Since this was a cavalry style belt, we decided in the end that we wanted pictures with our horse Duncan, who I call my tall son. You may hear me reference him here or in other places on the channel. And we had a lot of fun doing that. Duncan had more fun than the rest of us. He was really in the mood for zoomies. So we ended up just doing pictures on the ground. Introducing him to wearing a sword and a human in a mood where he wanted to run off into the sunset didn't seem like such a great idea, but I hope you enjoyed the photos of the finished product. I'm really happy with how this turned out, and more importantly, Rich seems very pleased with it. I think I might have a repeat client on my hands. Also, all of the cool horse stuff that I wanted to make now looks super achievable, so why would I buy cool bridles and tack when I could make it for 5 times the price? Great investment, right? Anyway, what do you think I should make next? I'm thinking a bridle for Duncan, but I could go any direction. So let me know what you think in the comments. Thank you so much for coming on this journey with us. I had a great time learning how to do all the leather work, and I'm super pleased to be able to show you what it is that we came up with in the end. Adios! Once again, thank you so much for watching. You can find me at Latina Living History on YouTube, Instagram, and Facebook. I've got cat hair inside my glasses.